This teenager's life was taken while filming a TikTok.
This is the disturbing case of Kalisha Williams, a 16-year-old girl who told her parents she was going out to a party. Now, Kalisha was not going to go to this party alone. She was going to go with a friend. And her friend's parents told Kalisha's parents that they would chaperone the girls. They were heading to an Airbnb party and there were no boys invited. Sadly, none of these things were true. On the 26th of December 2020, Kalisha and her friends ended up at the Hyatt Regency. The chaperones dropped them off there and left. Now, the girls went to a room that they believe were booked by the chaperones. At about 12:02 that evening, Kalisha decides to film a TikTok. Now, as she is doing so, she suddenly becomes startled. It looks like as though she's noticed someone entering her room. At 12:23 p.m., Kalisha is no longer alive. Turns out there were two boys at this hotel party. One of them walked into Kalisha's room. He attacked her and ended up shooting her. Now, Kalisha was rushed to hospital, but she had sadly already passed away. Her parents were informed 8 hours after the incident that their daughter was no longer alive. Now, they were devastated, and it isn't exactly clear what happened to her. What is known is a 16-year-old boy whose identity has been concealed was named the culprit. He was charged as a minor and served 1 year in prison. If you want to hear more 7 Sin crime stories, remember to follow. A man is woken up in the middle of the night by strange sounds. He installs a security camera and is completely horrified by what he sees. Jerome Kennedy lived in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania with his wife and 10-month-old baby. Now, over the past few months, Jerome could hear strange noises coming from the attic. Now, he didn't really think too much of it till one day he swore he saw a flashlight coming from one of the beams. So that was the final straw. Jerome went up to investigate. He saw nothing in the attic. Then he went to his neighbor's house. They shared a wall. And he asked Robert Havalia, age 69, if he had seen anything. Robert was like, "No, buddy, I've seen nothing." In fact, he said he had secured his portion of the attic because he was planning to sell the house. Jerome, however, was not convinced. He knew something was happening in his attic, so he installed a security camera. And this is what he sees. And honestly, it's so creepy. In the middle of the night, a man removed the partition separating the attics of his neighbor and his. Jerome recognizes this man. It's Robert. Now, what Robert does is super unsettling. He drills a hole in the roof and just sits there for 30 minutes watching Jerome's 10-month-old baby. He just covers up the hole and crawls back to his house. Now, when Jerome sees this, he's horrified. Calls the police and Robert is arrested. They then investigate the attic and they find dozens of holes drilled into the wall. Robert had been doing this for months. Robert was charged for trespassing and stalking. If you want to hear more 7 Sin crime stories, remember to follow.
This cop catfished a 15-year-old girl and then murdered her family. On November 25th, 2022, 28-year-old Austin Lee Edwards drove from Virginia to Riverside, California to a 15-year-old's home who he had been speaking with online. Edward posed as this 17-year-old boy when he was speaking to this 15-year-old girl. He found her address and then went to her home and murdered her mom and grandparents. Edward then set the house on fire and drove off with the teen, but was found hours later by deputies in San Bernardino County. There was a shootout between Edward and the police until he decided to take his own life. After further investigation into Edward, it was discovered that he recently moved into a new home in Saltville, Virginia, and neighbors noticed that he hung black curtains around the whole house. They thought this was odd, but didn't think much of it because he was a cop. Records even show that in 2016, Edward was detained for threatening to murder his own dad and take his own life, but a thorough background check was not done before he was hired as a cop. This defense attorney was murdered by his client's ex-husband. On December 7th, 2022, 65-year-old Alan Teo went to the office of divorce attorney Doug Lewis and murdered him. Doug was actually representing Alan's soon-to-be ex-wife in their divorce battle. But on this day, Alan arrived to Doug's office and shot him. Then he poured gas all over the office and set it on fire. A witness saw Alan near the office with burn marks and he smelled like gasoline, so police were called and he was arrested. Alan allegedly did this because he was upset about the divorce and how much money he had to pay. Alan was charged with murder and first-degree arson and is being held at the Gwinnett County Jail in Georgia.
This is the case of Irmgard Furchner, a 97-year-old woman who was a secretary at a concentration camp, and she just got charged with aiding and abetting the murder of 10,505 people. As a teenager, Irmgard worked as a secretary for the Stutthof concentration camp's commander, where she did both typing and stenography. Stutthof is in northern Poland, and she worked there for 2 years until it was shut down with the completion of World War II. The people that were detained here were Jews, non-Jewish Polish people, political prisoners, accused criminals, people suspected of homosexuality, and Jehovah's Witnesses. Over the years, they used multiple methods of mass murder, including lethal injection and the gas chamber, but starvation and disease also played a role in the killings. In 1944, it was decided that Stutthof would expand, and they sent 27 transports there that carried 48,000 people. With this influx of people, the gas chamber became the main form of mass murder. Over 60,000 people died at Stutthof in between 1939 and 1945, and 28,000 of those were Jews. After Stutthof got shut down, Irmgard got married to a former SS squad leader and got an administrative secretary job in northern Germany. In February of 2021, Irmgard was indicted after a 5-year investigation of her involvement in the murders that happened at the Stutthof concentration camp. A couple of weeks before her trial started in September of 2021, Irmgard actually fled her retirement home in a taxi cab, but she was found shortly later on the street by police. For that, she was held for 5 days, and then she was released because of her age and condition. During the trial, Irmgard's lawyer argued that she wasn't aware of the killings and there was no proof that she did, and to gain perspective, the judge, another judge, and a historian went to Stutthof to see the grounds. Because the judge was able to see the grounds, he said that it was unimaginable that Irmgard never noticed the smoke or the smell that was coming from the furnaces. He also mentioned that Irmgard didn't have to work there and that she could have quit at any time. During the trial, survivors also testified, and one of them said that Irmgard would have had to know what was going on because she was the secretary of the commander. Throughout the trial and all of the court hearings, Irmgard didn't say a single thing until the very end when she said, quote, "I'm sorry about everything that happened. I regret that I was in Stutthof at the time. That's all I can say." Because Irmgard was 18 and 19 at the time of her working at Stutthof, she was actually tried as a juvenile. In order to be tried as an adult with their laws, she would have had to be 21 or older. And on December 20th of this year, Irmgard was convicted of aiding and abetting the murder of 10,505 people and the complicity in the attempted murder of 5 people. She was sentenced with a 2-year suspended prison term, which is similar to probation, but not exactly the same. With suspended sentencing, the person is originally sentenced to jail time, and then the judge suspends it, which delays the individual from going to jail and allows them to serve the time like probation. If they're able to serve their time without any violations, then usually the case gets dismissed and jail time won't have to be served. Because of the age of the survivors and the criminals of the Holocaust, this might be the last trial of its kind.
Have you guys heard of the incel theory yet for the Idaho murders? Because there could be something to it. There's a theory making the rounds online, and it has been backed up by a lot of experts, that the person behind this brutal slaying of 4 college students in Idaho is an incel, and that stands for involuntary celibate. Incels are part of an online subculture of people who cannot find a sexual partner. Now, let's be clear, this is very different than someone who is really lonely or even lifelong virgins. Incels self-identify as incels. They're typically white men who are heterosexual and cisgendered, and they blame women for the fact that they are virgins and cannot have sex with a partner. And importantly, this is a very dark side of misogyny, and typically incels will actually encourage hatred or violence against those women. Now, the manner of killing in this case, stabbing, also adds some credence to the incel theory for a few reasons. First off, stabbing is very, very personal. The perpetrator has to get very close to their victim in order to do it. And in this case, the stabbing was particularly brutal, especially with Kaylee here, that would suggest that the perpetrator was frenzied and enraged. Secondly, none of the victims in this case were sexually assaulted. And that's important because inherent in what an incel is a person who is a virgin, who is involuntarily celibate, unable to have sex with a partner. And thirdly, I recently sat down with a panel of experts to talk about this case on Dr. Phil. And the criminologist I was speaking to explained that stabbing itself, that actual physical penetration of the knife, can be a substitution for a sex act. And interestingly, investigators have been asked about this incel theory and whether an incel could be behind this quadruple homicide. And it's important to note that the investigators have not ruled that out.
One of the worst serial killers of all time is being released from prison. He goes by the name of the Serpent, and he's been linked to 20 murders of Western tourists all throughout Asia and the Middle East. Most of these attacks took place on the hippie trail, where he would lure in tourists by pretending to be a spiritual guru and then poison them. Some of his victims he would actually poison and then nurse back to health because he thought that it made them loyal to him. One time in 1976, he attempted to drug a group of 60 French students who were on holiday in New Delhi so that he could rob them. But he gave them too powerful of a dose and they all started passing out while standing up. Authorities caught on to this and he was arrested, where he was then linked to the murders of 20 other people. And he is currently being released from prison on good behavior and because of his old age. And we've seen this before with repeat killers where they just stop killing while they're in prison and then start killing the second they get out.
Hey y'all, today's true crime story is so crazy, you might want to stay to the end for the plot twist. Today's story takes place in Orange County, California. Although the two dated briefly, in 2016, Angela married the love of her life, U.S. Marshal Ian Diaz. Around the time they got married, Angela found out that she was pregnant with twins. The couple were so excited and it seemed like things were going good for them. Unfortunately, all that would change. Angela began receiving sexual assault threats through emails. Someone was sending her pictures of dead babies, and she even said that somebody was outside of her house stalking her. Somehow, Angela found out that there was a sick sexual assault fantasy ad on Craigslist with all her personal information on it. At this point, Angela is freaked out, she's scared, she don't know who this person could possibly be, but things get worse. That same year in 2016, Angela called 911 to inform them that she was attacked in her own garage. When the police arrived, they noticed that Angela had bruises on her neck, and the police asked her, "Do you know who your attacker was?" And she said yes. Angela said her attacker was Michelle Hadley, her husband's ex-fiancée. The police were asking her, "Ma'am, are you sure?" And she said, "Yes, I am positively sure." The police thought Michelle had motive. They was like, just think about it. Michelle was once engaged to Ian. She wanted to build his life with him. So, she could possibly be jealous. Although Michelle claimed that she was innocent, the police were not buying her story, and she was in jail for 3 months. And this will be something that the police will later regret. First of all, the police didn't even do a complete investigation. They just thought that it was Michelle, and they just threw her in jail, basically. After finally tracing the IP addresses, the police finally realized who was Angela's stalker. And it was no one other than Angela Diaz herself. Yes, y'all, Angela was her own stalker the whole time. She faked the emails, the Craigslist, the attack. And y'all remember when I told y'all she was pregnant? She faked that too. Come to find out that Angela got those fake sonograms from Etsy. Angela would soon confess, and she was charged with 2 counts of forgery, 2 counts of false imprisonment by menace, and much more, and she was sentenced to 5 years in prison. Michelle, on the other hand, sued the state of California for being wrongfully accused, and she won her case. I'm still stuck on the police work. If the police did a complete investigation from the beginning, they would have got the right person. Angela was known to be a pathological liar, and it seemed like all her lies got caught up with her. Alright y'all, I'll be back to do more true crime videos for you guys.